Chapter 1. The Unwelcome Wake-Up Call. I woke up to the sound of furious knocking, the kind of pounding that makes you think the house is on fire. Half asleep, I stumbled to the door, rubbing my eyes as I swung it open. There she was. A middle-aged woman stood on my porch, clipboard in hand, her aggressively pursed lips twisting into a scowl. The overpowering scent of floral perfume hit me like a brick wall, making me take a step back. "Good morning," she said, though her tone suggested she wished me anything but that. "We need to talk about your situation." I blinked. Situation? She sniffed and glanced over my shoulder, where my newly planted garden beds sat in the early morning sun. "Your farm." She spat the word like it was something foul. "This is a neighborhood, not a barnyard." Oh, so this was that neighbor. I'd heard whispers about her when I moved in a few weeks ago, a self-appointed HOA president despite there being no actual HOA. She ruled through intimidation, passive-aggressive notes, and sheer stubbornness. And now, apparently, I was her newest target. I sighed. "I don't see a problem. Everything's legal. The city allows backyard farming." She narrowed her eyes. "That may be, but I am very concerned about the aesthetic damage you're causing." "Property values, young man. Do you even care?" I fought the urge to laugh. "I don't think a few tomatoes and some chickens are going to tank the housing market." Her face twitched. "This isn't a joke. People move here for peace and order, not dirt." I glanced around at the spotless sidewalks, the meticulously mowed lawns, and the soulless, identical houses lined up like they'd been copy-pasted from a brochure. It wasn't peace and order, it was sterile. "You know what's funny?" I said, stepping forward. "I moved here for peace, too. Peace from traffic, from noise, and from people telling me what I can do on my own property." Her eyes flared. "You'll regret this," she snapped before storming off. I should have known that wasn't the end of it. Chapter 2. The War Begins. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door, covered in red ink like a high school essay gone horribly wrong. Notice of violation. It listed nonsense like unsanitary farming conditions, non-compliance with neighborhood standards, and my personal favorite, excessive presence of vegetables. Apparently, my tomatoes were an environmental hazard. I chuckled, tossed the letter in the trash, and went about my day. But Karen wasn't finished. Over the next week, she escalated. First, she called the city, reporting to me for every possible infraction. When the inspector showed up, took one look at my well-maintained garden, and left without issue, she tried to rally the neighbors against me. But when people saw my backyard was more organized than most of their own, the gossip died out. I thought maybe she'd let it go. I was wrong. One night, I caught her sneaking into my yard. She tiptoed past the rows of kale, her chunky sandals sinking into the soil as she squinted at my chicken coop. I watched from the porch, sipping my coffee and waiting. The second she touched the gate, I cleared my throat. She shrieked, stumbling backward. "Oh, I was just checking." "Checking what?" "My excessive vegetables." Her face turned an impressive shade of red. "I had a complaint about the smell." I crossed my arms. "From who?" She faltered. "From concerned parties." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You do realize trespassing is illegal, right?" She straightened her posture, suddenly regaining her usual arrogance. "I am merely performing my duty as an advocate for the neighborhood's well-being." "Good to know." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "Smile for the camera." Her expression dropped as she spotted the security light blinking above the coop. Without another word, she turned on her heel and speed-walked back to her house. Chapter 3. Karen's Next Move. I expected that to be the final warning. Surely she'd realize by now that I wasn't going to roll over and obey her fake authority. I underestimated Karen's commitment to being an absolute menace. The next morning, my front yard was covered in HOA violation notices, dozens of them, handwritten. She had spent the entire night plastering them across my mailbox, front door, and even my fence. I picked one up. Final notice: cease all farming operations immediately or face legal action. I couldn't help but laugh. The sheer dedication was almost admirable. Almost. That's when I started digging. If she wanted to go to war, I needed to know exactly what I was up against. And what I found. Oh, it was beautiful. Karen wasn't part of any official HOA. There was no HOA. She had been running a fake one for years, tricking people into thinking they had to follow her made-up rules. Worse, She had been charging homeowners HOA fees, money she was pocketing for herself. Now I had a choice. I could ignore her and let her keep ranting until she found a new victim, or I could play this game to win. I looked at my thriving garden, my chickens clucking happily, and then at the stack of fake violation letters in my hands. Game on. Chapter 4. Unmasking the Fraud. The more I dug into Karen's fake HOA, the more absurd it became. She had been collecting fees from homeowners for years, issuing bogus fines, and even threatening legal action against those who didn't comply. I had stumbled upon a suburban dictatorship built entirely on bluffing and intimidation. So, I decided it was time to pull the rug out from under her. I compiled all my evidence, fake violation notices, testimonies from neighbors who had been paying her, and the city's official stance confirming there was no HOA. Then, I made copies and placed them in every neighbor's mailbox with a note. You are not legally obligated to follow Karen's rules. There is no HOA. By the next evening, the neighborhood was buzzing. People started confronting Karen in their driveways, demanding answers. I sat back on my porch, enjoying the show as Karen flailed to keep control. Chapter 5. The Public Meltdown. 2 days later, she went nuclear. Karen stormed up my driveway, fists clenched, her ever-present clipboard shaking in her grip. You think you're clever? Spreading lies about me, she snapped. I leaned against the porch railing. Not lies, just facts. Her face twisted. You're ruining the neighborhood. Turning people against me. I smirked. Karen, I didn't turn them against you. You did that all by yourself. Before she could respond, a group of neighbors began gathering on the sidewalk. Jim, an older gentleman who had lived here for decades, crossed his arms and frowned at Karen. You owe me 3 years' worth of fake HOA fees, he said. I want my money back. Others chimed in. Yeah, where's all the money been going? Karen paled. I was just keeping order. Maintaining standards. With our money, someone scoffed. Realizing she was outnumbered, Karen turned on her heel and fled to her house, slamming the door behind her. Chapter 6. The Final Nail in the Coffin. I wasn't done. That evening, I emailed all the evidence to the local news. The next morning, a reporter showed up at Karen's door with a camera crew. It was glorious. Flustered and trapped, Karen tried to play the victim, claiming she had only been doing what was best for the community. But as the reporter listed out her fraudulent activities, her excuses crumbled. By the end of the week, Karen's so-called HOA was fully exposed. People were filing complaints, demanding refunds, and the authorities were starting to take an interest in where all that money had gone. And then, just like that, Karen disappeared. Epilogue, peace at last. 2 weeks later, a moving truck appeared in front of Karen's house. Word spread quickly. She was leaving. No one knew where she was going, and no one cared. The neighborhood, once tense under her rule, felt lighter. People were smiling more and talking to each other. Some even started their own backyard gardens, inspired by my so-called unsanitary farm. Jim walked up to my porch one afternoon and grinned. Never thought I'd say this, but your chickens saved the neighborhood. I laughed, raising my glass. To freedom from fake HOAs. The war was over. And I had won.